First to the stage is Cristina Garmendia, author of the groundbreaking Equity Indicators Report. Her job is to give us a sense of what we know from the data that she's collected. Thank you, Cristina. And remember, if you have questions on these issues, write them down. Make sure we'll give a chance to have questions at the end. With that, I'm going to welcome Cristina to the stage.
I had extraordinary access and collaboration with department staff that's extremely rare in accountability projects. So I want to take time to thank the Cruzen administration for allowing me to largely conduct my investigations without interference, and for former Chief Resiliency Officer Patrick Brown and former Deputy Mayor Nicole Hudson for selecting me to lead this work. An output of the Equity Indicators Project was the 2018 baseline report. 262 pages of hard numbers quantifying how far St. Louis City has to go before achieving racial equity. That report was released on January 4th, 2019. As it is a baseline report, I expect subsequent reports to continue to refine, improve, and update the data, metrics, and recommendations. Today I've been asked to introduce our esteemed panel by highlighting the equity indicators developed around the topics of political representation and criminal justice. But my work was made possible by a coalition of partners. In 2017, the City of St. Louis, in partnership with Ford through Ferguson and the United Way, applied and was chosen to be one of 5 cities to create an equality indicators tool under the guidance of the City University of New York's Institute for State and Local Governance with funding from the Rockefeller Foundation. The partners here in St. Louis were motivated to apply for this opportunity in order to respond to a call to action from the Ferguson Commission for a racial equity benchmarking process. But how do you measure racial equity? For our report, we predominantly used something called a racial disparity analysis, where we compared outcomes between Black and white people. And so my task was to identify measures of racial disparity in the priority areas identified by the Ferguson Commission: youth at the center, opportunity to thrive, and justice for all. The following topics were covered in each section. Under youth at the center, child well-being, education quality, and educational attainment. Under opportunity to thrive, financial empowerment, health and safety in neighborhoods. And under justice for all, policing, court reform, and civic engagement. There are 72 indicators in all. But today I will be debriefing you on some of the findings from the Justice for All section, specifically political representation and criminal justice. So 4 of the indicators are in the police reform section, 2 are in the court reform section, and 2 are in the civic engagement section. And if you need to see this larger, I will look at the report. However, it does not have accountability measures for every institution involved in the justice system. For example, the prosecutor's office. That's because prosecutors have historically resisted transparency and accountability for their decision-making, such as when and why they choose to prosecute. One question that came up repeatedly was this one, particularly when I was thinking about ways to measure civic engagement. What is equitable representation? Is it an outcome? Outcome metrics are typical measures of success. So, equal representation. So if the city is 48% Black, 48% of our elected officials should also be Black. However, this doesn't tell us a lot about the quality or impact of their representation. Are these elected officials advocating for policies that advance Black people? Or are they preventing policies that would have disparate impact on minority populations? Or is there enough of them to have an impact at all? So disclaimer, we have not been measuring that as a community. So what else can we measure? Process. Do we have equal access for opportunities to gain leadership or campaign experience? Now, historical information was not part of this project, but I thought it would be important to provide some context for the first finding that I'm going to share with you today. 1764, the city of St. Louis was founded, but it was not until 1969 that the first Black alderperson was elected. And Wally said the caucus was founded 30 years ago, so that was shortly before the first Black mayor was elected. In 2018, do we have equal political representation? Yes. So in 2018, there were 52 elected officials represented in my count, including local, state, and federal representatives. So elected officials include the mayor and the board of aldermen, and state and federal representatives, but also roles like sheriff, recorder of deeds, collector of revenue, circuit attorney, comptroller, treasurer, license collector. So those are all included in this count. But once you take population into account, you'll see that white residents are they're slightly more likely represented in elected office than black residents. You'll see throughout my presentation and the report that we put numbers of representatives in context with the population of the city. This is called a rate, a mild form of statistics, and we use it to talk about the prevalence of diseases such as politicians. But I think it's important to concern ourselves with other types of representation.
Yeah.
While there are a limited number of elected officials, I worked with our personnel department to identify all city employees in management, supervisory, and decision-making roles. There are 713. From commissioners to the more anonymous middle managers, many decisions about the policies and priorities of institutions are made by leaders that are not elected. So the city management representation equity indicator measures the rate of employees in management, supervisory, and decision-making roles across the City of St. Louis departments per 100,000 residents. And most of those people are white. So you can see here, 494 of those 713, or 69%, are white. In fact, there are nearly 3 times as many white managers as black managers than you would expect based on the population. So how did that happen? I was able to go more in depth with a single department, police. Police department representation as an issue got some national attention after the death of Michael Brown due to the dramatic difference in the population policing and the population being policed in Ferguson. A police force that was 94% white, a population that was majority black. So the media was quick to point out that Ferguson's not an outlier for the region. Across St. Louis City and County, the demographics of our police force do not reflect the demographics of our population. So it should not come as new information to this audience that black people are underrepresented in the St. Louis City Police Department as well. All of my papers. Because I can't remember all these numbers. The demographics of our police force are an outcome, and they reflect a long process of recruitment, training, promotion, and retention. The demographics of our police force also reflect the unequal state of health, education, and how residents themselves experience policing in our city. Through interviewing staff from both police and personnel, I found there were 13 unique steps in the police recruiting process in which we lose or release candidates. Up until this project, these numbers had never before been compiled in one place. And we highlighted 3 of the most critical decision points in the pipeline to be part of the Equity Indicators Project that are important to be monitored to make sure investments or reforms are working. Starting with the outcome metric, the demographic representation of our police force. So in 2016, which was the last time that the police department released an annual report, there were 1,187 officers, of which 763 were white and 385 were black. What this translates to in terms of racial disparities is that white residents are more than twice as likely as black residents to be represented in the police department. Some people might say, black residents don't want to become police officers. But that isn't quite true. In 2017, we received applications from 394 white applicants and 366 black applicants. White residents are only 15% more likely to submit job applications to the police department than black residents. However, black candidates have a much harder time making it through the recruiting process after they apply, such as in the training academy. A third of black trainees resign or are dismissed, compared to only 10% of white trainees. This is the point at which recruits are being paid to go through training. So they already passed background checks, psych exams, physical tests, and so on. So what does this look like from the perspective of Black residents interested in becoming police officers? So in 2017, there were 366 applicants that were Black, of which only 20 made it through the personnel gauntlet, which takes months, by the way, to join the police academy as a trainee. And at the time of publication, only 14 of those trainees had graduated to become a police probationary officer. By comparison, we hired 90% of our white trainees, 56 compared to 14. So, the result being, not only are we not adding enough officers, only 20% of new officers are Black. So our police force is becoming less representative. Okay, so I wanted to share with you just some of the most interesting data I was able to find. In particular, I want to highlight where we have criminalized poverty. An example of this is people who are charged with driving without car insurance. This data comes from an analysis I did on driving status violations, the majority of which were driving without insurance, but also expired plates and suspended driver's licenses. The thing about driving without insurance is that it's not some visibly dangerous activity. It's something you only know about a car and its driver when you stop the vehicle. It's a charge that is caught only by police officers. I don't care how nosy your neighbor is, they aren't calling you in if you don't have car insurance. And we know police stop Black drivers more often. While we don't know what percentage of stops are of city residents, from the Attorney General's office data, we do know that 63% of traffic stops made by the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department are of Black drivers. And because there are actually fewer Black residents of driving age in St. Louis than white residents, so driving age is someone over 15, we are estimating that Black drivers are nearly twice as likely as white drivers to be stopped by the police while driving in St. Louis. The U.S. Treasury Department observed that unaffordable auto insurance leaves many Americans in the predicament of either not driving, which dramatically restricts their economic opportunities, or driving without insurance, which not only is illegal, but puts them and other drivers at risk. So in 2016, there were 11,106 cases with charges of driving without insurance in St. Louis City's municipal court. As a note, I work directly with the court's technology provider, Regis, to design a special report to run this analysis, which they charged the court for. Thank you very much. 79% of those cases had Black defendants. So that's 8,753 Black drivers compared to 2,211 white drivers. However, because we estimate that there's more white drivers than Black drivers in St. Louis City, the rate of cases of driving without insurance is even more lopsided. So Black drivers are 4 times as likely as white drivers to be charged with driving without insurance. The takeaway from this is that it's fair to say it's a challenge for many drivers in the St. Louis region to afford car insurance. And our current strategy for dealing with cases like this is to fine drivers for not having insurance, or to put points on their license, which does not address the underlying tension that many people must drive to have reliable transportation to work, but their job's wages are not enough to budget for big ticket items like car insurance, especially if you've been inconsistently insured. Your rates go up. So moving on. There were over 43,000 municipal warrants issued in 2017 by the city's municipal court. Is that a lot? I checked with the national, so there's not a lot of data out there from other cities to compare. That's in the public realm, but I checked with the National League of Cities and some other umbrella groups, and the answer is yes, it is. Municipal warrants, what are those? They're issued when defendants fail to appear for 2 scheduled court dates on municipal charges, or when a defendant fails to comply with the payment plan agreed upon in court. When a municipal warrant is issued, defendants are arrested when they encounter police and are placed into custody until they can see a judge who will release the defendant with a new court date. The defendant can be held up to 48 hours on a minor traffic violation and 72 hours on other violations before they see a judge and their case is disposed or their case is continued. So to do some translation, 43,000 warrants. That could be up to 86,000 missed court dates in a single year. At what point do you wonder, instead of asking what's wrong with people, what's wrong with our court? They offer payment plans, community service, and even treatment court. So someone fund this study, please. I still don't have an answer. The municipal court gave me the breakdown for warrants by zip code. I did that so I could weed out non-city residents. 66% of those 43,000 warrants are issued to city residents, so just over 30,000 warrants. Remember, our population is just over 300,000 residents, but those warrants are not sprinkled evenly across the city. So in majority white zip codes, municipal warrants are issued at a rate of 38 warrants per every 1,000 residents, while in majority black zip codes, they're issued at a rate of 152 warrants for every 1,000 residents. So that means warrants are issued to residents of majority black zip codes at 4 times the rate of majority white zip codes. One thing to note is that these are not unique people with warrants. People can have multiple warrants. But ignoring that, the sheer number of warrants issued by our court alone, never mind all the county courts, suggests that more than 1 in 10 residents in majority black zip codes are living life with a warrant out for their arrest for a municipal level charge. That's stressful. Odds are good when a traffic stop occurs in these neighborhoods that the police officer will be obligated to arrest. And the data around traffic stops suggests that this is the case. Just to walk you through this, 32,000 stops of black drivers. Black drivers are more likely to be searched than white drivers, so 8% of stops result in searches, but they're less likely to be found with contraband. So only 4% of those searches end up in contraband compared to white drivers that are searched. But black drivers are twice as likely to be arrested. Okay. And so, if arrests are a measure of police performance, police officers will be incentivized to conduct traffic stops in majority black neighborhoods. So I hope my overarching message is clear on this mess. Many of these events in the criminal justice system are interlinked, tangled up, suffocating, especially when you consider how many people are caught up in multiple cases across multiple jurisdictions for the same underlying problem. However, can our institutions coordinate to solve those underlying issues? And with that, I'd like to cede the stage to our panel, but first, Wray Clay.
My name is Wray Clay. I'm the Vice President of Diversity and Inclusion for United Way of Greater St. Louis. Been in that position since March of 2016. Been with United Way for 36 and a half years. Got a little bit of seasoning on me. So, let me tell you about the next step. What you hear is St. Louis City. When I'm here to tell you that in radical collaboration, ever since December of 2016, we have been working, we convened some thought leaders because United Way needed to figure out how to best show up in the space of diversity, equity, inclusion. It's a new space for us. We convened thought leaders. We said, you know what? The Ferguson Commission called for a regional benchmarking process to measure the region's progress in advancing racial equity. What better space for us to be in? So in radical, we have stayed glued at the hip, regardless of what happens. We have stayed glued at the hip because of the conversations that were going on. We leveraged funding, brought Cristina in. She gained access to St. Louis City. You saw what she did. What we have done is we paused our work. In unbelievable collaboration, we paused our work to allow her to do what she needed to do so that we could replicate her work across counties and actually do a comparative analysis. So what we have for you is we said we were going to do 16, our eyes crossed. Then we said 8 counties, and they still crossed because we pivoted toward the Ferguson Commission report, which is a lot of policy, which complicates the discussion when you talk about data. So then we said 4. So for St. Louis City, St. Louis County, St. Charles County, and for St. Clair County, for that stretch, what we have done is replicate what Cristina has done for St. Louis City and developed a regional racial equity dashboard. And what it, I know, it's so good. So good. I know. So this is the deal. So we're going to unveil it, launch it at the racial equity, the first ever racial equity summit in the greater St. Louis region. Which is October 10th and 11th. That's when we're going to unveil it, because it needs to be unveiled in context. And what it will show you and tell you will be demonstrated in the discussion of the panelists that you will hear next. And so I will call you all to a challenge to come to the Equity Summit to see what we have collected, to see the story that it tells about the region, and to see the story that we cannot tell about the region until we do some better together work. Thank you.